The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining colony of Zerion 7. The air hummed with the sound of drilling equipment and the gentle chatter of workers starting their day. Zaraketh adjusted her protective gear and checked her readings one more time. The crystalline patches on her tall, slender frame glowed softly blue as she focused on the mineral deposits below ground. "Mama, look what I found." Her daughter Neela held up a small, shiny rock. The 5-year-old's crystal features sparkled with excitement, her bioluminescent skin shifting from blue to warm yellow. Zaraketh smiled and knelt down to examine the rock. "That's beautiful, little star. But remember to stay in the safe area while Mama works." The Catharan species had been working alongside humans on Zerion 7 for 3 years now. Their natural ability to sense mineral deposits through emotional connection with the planet made them invaluable to the mining operation. In return, the humans provided technology and protection. It was a good partnership. Marcus Chen wiped sweat from his forehead as he operated the heavy drilling equipment. The former Earth Defense Force Marine had found peace in the steady work of mining. Around him, other human workers chatted with their Catharan colleagues. Sarah Kim was showing a young Catharan engineer how to calibrate the new extraction tools. James Okafor was sharing photos of his newborn daughter with anyone who would listen. The colony felt like home. Different species, different worlds, but they had built something together here. Dr. Elena Vasquez was in the medical bay, reviewing health reports for both human and Catharan workers. The interspecies cooperation had led to fascinating discoveries about biology and medicine. She was particularly interested in how Catharan empathic abilities seemed to help with healing. Everything changed in an instant. The first explosion shook the ground. Marcus looked up from his drilling equipment, his military instincts immediately alert. That wasn't a mining blast. Too close. Too sudden. Black ships descended from the sky like angry insects. They moved with deadly precision, surrounding the colony before anyone could react. The ships bore the red markings of the hegemony, a militaristic alliance known throughout the galaxy for one thing: slavery. Raiders. Someone screamed. Panic erupted across the colony. Workers ran in all directions, some toward the emergency bunkers, others toward their families. The hegemony troops poured out of their ships wearing dark armor and carrying energy weapons. They moved with practiced efficiency, clearly having done this many times before. Marcus's training kicked in. He counted the enemy forces, noted their equipment, looked for escape routes. But his heart sank as he realized the truth. They were outnumbered and outgunned. The colony's defenses were meant for wild animals and equipment failures, not a military assault. Zaraketh grabbed Neela and ran toward the residential area. Her daughter was crying, the child's empathic abilities picking up the terror and panic from everyone around them. The emotional overflow made Neela's crystals flash rapidly between colors. "It's okay, little star," Zaraketh whispered, though her own voice shook with fear. "We just need to hide until help comes." But there was nowhere to hide. The hegemony troops had surrounded the entire colony. They herded the workers toward the central plaza with ruthless efficiency. Anyone who resisted was stunned with energy weapons and dragged along. Marcus found himself forced to march alongside Dr. Vasquez and James Okafor. They exchanged worried glances but said nothing. The raiders were listening for any sign of resistance planning. In the plaza, the true horror became clear. The hegemony soldiers were separating people by species, humans on one side, Catharans on the other. But they were doing something else too. They were separating Catharan families. Children were being pulled away from their parents. "No." Zaraketh screamed as a soldier grabbed Neela. "Please, she's just a baby." Other Catharan parents were crying out in distress. Their bioluminescent skin flickered wildly with panic and desperation. The emotional resonance was so strong that even the humans could feel it. A wave of pure parental terror that cut through species barriers. Commander Vex stepped forward. He was a large reptilian being with cold yellow eyes and scarred armor. In his hands he carried a bioscanner that beeped as he pointed it at different Catharans. "Excellent," he said in a harsh voice. "The children show strong empathic readings. They'll bring good prices at the consortium slave markets." Marcus felt sick. He had heard about the consortium, a network of illegal traders who dealt in sentient beings. Catharan children were especially valuable, because their empathic abilities could be exploited for various purposes. Mining, manufacturing, even entertainment. The younger they were, the easier they were to train and control. Load the younglings onto Transport 3, Vex ordered his troops. The adults go to Transport 2, we'll sort them later. Sarah Kim spoke up from the human group. You can't do this. These are civilians. Children. A hegemony soldier hit her with the butt of his weapon. She fell to the ground, blood running from her nose. James moved to help her, but other weapons were immediately pointed at him. The human settlements will be next, Vex announced casually. Your species breeds quickly and adapts well to industrial work. But first we finish here. Zaraketh watched in horror as Neela was carried toward the transport ship. Her daughter was reaching back toward her, calling Mama, Mama in their native language. The sound broke something deep inside Zaraketh's heart. She wasn't the only one. All around the plaza, Kitharan parents were being torn away from their children. The emotional pain was so intense that it created a feedback loop. Each parent's anguish amplified the others, creating a wave of psychic distress that washed over everyone present. The human workers felt it too. Marcus saw tears in Dr. Vasquez's eyes. James was clenching his fists so hard his knuckles were white. Sarah was back on her feet, her face blazing with anger despite the blood. Please, Zaraketh begged, falling to her knees in front of Commander Vex. My daughter has done nothing wrong. She's only 5 years old. She doesn't even understand what's happening. Vex looked down at her with cold amusement. That's exactly why she's valuable. Young minds are easier to shape. Then take me instead. Zaraketh's crystals blazed with desperate light. I'm fully developed. My abilities are stronger. I can do more work. Other Kitharan parents joined her plea. Take us, leave the children. Vex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Adult Kitharans are too set in their ways. You've had years to develop your own thoughts, your own resistance. Children adapt better to conditioning. He gestured to his troops, who began loading the crying children onto the transports. The parents' wails of grief echoed across the plaza. The emotional resonance was overwhelming. Pure, undiluted anguish that seemed to shake the very air. Marcus watched it all, his jaw clenched tight. He was counting guards, noting weapon positions, looking for any advantage. But the situation looked hopeless. Too many enemies, too many weapons, too many innocent lives at risk. The transport engines began warming up. Soon the children would be gone forever, lost in the dark corners of the galaxy where no rescue would ever find them. Neela's voice rose above the others, calling for her mother in a high, frightened cry that cut through every heart present. Human and Kitharan alike, everyone felt the child's terror. And Marcus Chen, former Marine and current mining engineer, felt something snap inside him. The raid was about to take a very different turn. The transport engines grew louder, their vibrations shaking the ground beneath everyone's feet. Zaraketh remained on her knees in front of Commander Vex, her crystalline features flickering between desperate blue and anguished purple. Around her, other Kitharan parents had also fallen to their knees, begging for their children's lives. Please, I'm begging you, Zaraketh said, her voice breaking. Neela is all I have left. Her father died in a mining accident 2 years ago. She's never been away from me for more than a few hours. Commander Vex studied his bioscanner readings with cold interest. According to this, your daughter has exceptional empathic strength for her age. The readings are off the charts. He looked down at Zaraketh with something that might have been curiosity.
Tell me, female, what makes her so special?
Zaraketh's hope flickered like a dying flame. Maybe if she could make him understand who Neela was, maybe he would show mercy. She can sense emotions from further away than most adult Kitharans. When someone is hurt or scared, she knows immediately. She's helped find lost miners in the tunnels just by feeling their fear. Excellent, Vex said, completely missing the point. That kind of sensitivity will be very useful to our clients. Natural-born empaths of that strength are rare. The hope died in Zaraketh's eyes. She realized that everything she said to try to save her daughter was only making things worse. Every special quality that made Neela precious to her also made the child more valuable as a slave. Behind the hegemony commander, the human workers stood bound together. Their hands were tied with energy restraints and guards kept weapons pointed at them. But Marcus noticed something that the raiders seemed to have missed. The humans weren't just scared. They were angry. Dr. Vasquez was watching the Kitharan children being loaded onto the transport with tears streaming down her face. She had delivered 3 of those children, including Neela. She had watched them take their first steps, heard their first words. To her, they weren't alien specimens, they were her patients. Her friends' children. James Okafor was thinking about his own daughter back on Earth. She was only 6 months old, but he could imagine her at Neela's age. The thought of anyone taking her away made him feel sick with rage. Sarah Kim was calculating. Her engineering mind was working through the numbers, guard positions, weapon types, possible escape routes. The odds were terrible, but she had helped design the colony's layout. She knew every tunnel, every backup system, every emergency protocol. Load Transport 3 first, Vex ordered his troops. The younger specimens need special handling. A soldier grabbed Neela more roughly than necessary. The little girl cried out in pain and fear, her empathic abilities sending out waves of distress that hit everyone in the plaza like a physical blow. Zara Keth felt her daughter's terror as if it were her own. The connection between Kithran parents and children was stronger than most species could understand. Every emotion Neela felt, Zara Keth experienced amplified. Wait. Zara Keth scrambled to her feet and grabbed Commander Vex's arm. I can pay you. The mining consortium. They have funds set aside for emergencies. Ransom money. It's worth more than whatever you'll get at the slave markets. Vex shook her off easily. Credits can be stolen or traced. A trained empathic slave is a renewable resource. Your daughter will work for decades. Then let me come with her. Zaraketh's voice rose to a desperate scream. I'll work. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't separate us. Other Kitharan parents joined in, their voices creating a chorus of desperation. Take us too. Don't take our children. Please, they're so young. But Vex was unmoved. Adult Kitharans are too resistant to conditioning. You've had years to develop your own will, your own bonds. Children adapt faster. They forget their old lives and accept their new ones. He gestured to his troops again. Continue loading. Marcus watched as little Neela was carried toward the transport. The child was reaching back toward her mother, tears streaming down her face. Her small voice called out, Mama, Mama. In both Kitharan and the broken English she had learned from the human workers. The sound hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He had no children of his own, but he had watched Neela grow up over the past year. She would bring him drawings of the mining equipment. She would hide behind his legs when new workers arrived, shy but curious. She called him Uncle Marcus and always wanted to hear stories about Earth. Around him, the other humans were having similar reactions. They had all become part of this strange extended family on Zerion 7. The Kitharans weren't just co-workers or allies. They were friends, neighbors, family. Please. Zaraketh made one last desperate attempt. She threw herself at Vex's feet again. I'll give you anything. My life, my abilities, everything I have. Just let her go home. Vex kicked her away. Your emotional attachments make you weak. It's exactly why adults are useless to us. The child will learn to be stronger. He raised his voice to address all the Kitharan parents. Stop your crying. In a few years you won't even remember these whelps clearly. We're doing you a favor, freeing you from the burden of raising weak offspring. That was too much for some of the Kitharans. Several parents tried to rush toward the transports despite the weapons pointed at them. The guards stunned them with energy blasts, leaving them twitching and unconscious on the ground. Zaraketh watched her friends collapse, her daughter disappearing into the transport ship, and felt something break inside her soul. The bioluminescence in her crystals faded to a dull gray, the color of absolute despair in her species. Neela, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Mama loves you. Mama will find you. But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Once the hegemony ships left, the children would disappear into the vast criminal network of the galaxy. They would be sold, resold, traded, and moved constantly to avoid detection. No rescue would ever find them. Commander Vex checked his chronometer. Transport 3 is nearly loaded. Begin processing Transport 2 for the adults, and prep Transport 4 for the human specimens. Marcus felt ice in his veins. They weren't just taking the Kitharans. They were going to take everyone. Sir, one of the guards called out, the human workers are proving difficult to restrain. Should we increase the stun settings? No, Vex replied. Damaged goods sell for less. Just keep them conscious and compliant until loading. Dr. Vasquez spoke up, her voice shaking with controlled fury. You're monsters. These are innocent children. These are valuable resources, Vex corrected. Nothing more. The transport ship's loading ramp began to close. Through the narrowing gap, Marcus could see Neela pressed against a window, still calling for her mother. Other Kitharan children were crying. their combined empathic distress creating waves of emotional pain that washed over the entire plaza. Zara Keth collapsed completely, her body shaking with silent sobs. The other Kytheran parents were in similar states, broken, defeated, their spirits crushed by helplessness. The human workers watched their friends suffering and felt something building inside them. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was a cold, calculating rage that came from watching innocents suffer while being forced to do nothing. Marcus tested his restraints again. The energy bonds were strong, but they weren't impossible to break if someone was willing to accept the pain. He had learned pain tolerance in the Marines. More importantly, he had learned that some things were worth any amount of pain. The transport engines reached full power. In moments, the ship would lift off with its cargo of stolen children. Marcus Chen made his decision. "That's enough," he said quietly. Commander Vex didn't hear him over the engine noise. Marcus raised his voice. "I said that's enough." And then everything changed. Marcus Chen had been working on his restraints since the moment they were applied. Years of military training had taught him to always look for escape opportunities, even when the situation seemed hopeless. The energy bonds were painful to break, but not impossible if someone was willing to endure the burning sensation. When he shouted, "Enough!" and surged forward, the nearest hegemony guard was caught completely off guard. Marcus slammed into him with his shoulder, sending the alien tumbling. In the confusion, Marcus grabbed the guard's weapon and rolled behind a mining equipment container. "Take cover," he shouted to the other humans. The response was immediate and surprising. Instead of panicking or freezing, every human worker in the plaza moved with sudden coordination. Dr. Vasquez dropped low and began crawling toward the wounded Kytherans. Sarah Kim rolled toward a tool shed. James Okafor started working on freeing other captives. Commander Vex spun around, his weapon raised. "Kill the human troublemaker. Continue loading procedures." But Marcus was no longer where he had been. His military training had kicked in completely. He was moving from cover to cover, using the mining equipment as shields, forcing the guards to split their attention between him and the other prisoners. "Sarah," Marcus called out as he dodged energy blasts. "Emergency protocols." Sarah Kim understood immediately. She had helped design the colony's safety systems, including emergency lockdown procedures. If she could reach the main control panel in the engineering building, she could activate systems that might help. "On it," she called back, sprinting toward the building while guards shot at her. Dr. Vasquez had reached the unconscious Kytherans and was checking their vital signs. They were alive but badly stunned. More importantly, she was now close enough to Zara Keth to speak to her. "Zara," she whispered urgently, "can you contact the children empathically? Can you tell them we're coming?" Zara Keth looked up with tear-filled eyes. "The transport ship. It has psychic dampeners. I can barely sense her anymore." "Then we'll have to move fast," Dr. Vasquez said grimly. Meanwhile, Marcus had managed to stun 2 more guards and capture their weapons. He tossed one to James Okafor, who caught it with surprising skill. "You know how to use that?" Marcus asked. 3 years in colonial security before I became a communications officer," James replied, checking the weapon's charge. "I remember a few things." Commander Vex was growing frustrated. This was supposed to be a simple raid on a defenseless mining colony. Instead, he was facing organized resistance from humans who seemed to know what they were doing. "What are these creatures?" he demanded of his lieutenant. "The intelligence report said they were civilian workers." "They are, sir," the lieutenant replied, ducking as Marcus's accurate fire forced him behind cover. "But humans have mandatory military service on most of their worlds. Even civilians have basic combat training." That wasn't entirely true, but the hegemony's intelligence on human culture was incomplete. They didn't understand that humans often developed protective instincts that transcended species boundaries. They had assumed the humans would prioritize their own safety over their alien co-workers. They were wrong. Sarah Kim reached the engineering building and began frantically working on the control systems. The colony's emergency protocols included lockdown shields, automated distress signals, and even some defensive systems designed to protect against dangerous wildlife. "Computer, activate Colony Defense Protocol 7, she commanded. "Warning. Protocol 7 will seal all buildings and activate perimeter defenses. This action cannot be reversed without administrator codes." "Confirm?" "Confirmed." Emergency override Sarah Kim Alpha 77. Immediately, protective barriers began rising around key buildings. Automated systems started sending distress signals to the nearest human military bases. Most importantly, the mining equipment began moving into defensive positions under computer control. Commander Vex realized what was happening. Stop that female. She's activating their defenses. But it was too late. The barriers were already in place and Sarah was safely locked inside the engineering building. From there, she could control much of the colony's infrastructure. Marcus took advantage of the confusion to advance on the transport ship where the children were being held. He had stunned 4 guards now, and was making his way through the plaza systematically. His old Marine training was coming back like riding a bicycle. Movement patterns, target priority, ammunition conservation. James, he called out. Can you get a message to the Defense Force? Already working on it, James replied. He had reached the communications building and was frantically trying to boost their signal strength. But the nearest base is 6 hours away. Then we hold for 6 hours, Marcus said simply. Dr. Vasquez was helping wounded Kitherans to their feet. Many were still weak from the stun blasts, but their empathic abilities were starting to return. She had an idea. Zara, can you and the others combine your empathic abilities? Create some kind of distraction? Zara Keth wiped her eyes and nodded. We can try, but it might affect everyone, including you humans. Do it, Dr. Vasquez said firmly. Our children are worth the risk. Zara Keth joined hands with the other Kitheran adults who were still conscious. Together they began to focus their empathic abilities, not for sensing or communication, but for projection. They pushed out every emotion they were feeling, their desperate love for their children, their fierce protective anger, their absolute determination to save their young ones. The wave of emotion hit the hegemony forces like a psychic tsunami. Suddenly, every raider in the plaza was experiencing the pure, undiluted parental instincts of an entire group of Kitherans. The intensity was overwhelming. Some guards stumbled and fell. Others began firing wildly, their coordination destroyed by the emotional overflow. Commander Vex himself staggered, his cold reptilian mind struggling to process feelings he had never experienced. What? What is this? He gasped. This, said Marcus Chen, appearing beside the transport ship with a captured plasma rifle, is what happens when you threaten our family. The humans had been affected by the empathic projection too, but differently. Instead of being overwhelmed, they found their own protective instincts amplified and focused. Every human in the plaza suddenly felt what the Kitheran parents were feeling, and their response was immediate and overwhelming. Sarah Kim activated the mining lasers, turning them against the hegemony ships. James Okafor boosted their distress signal so powerfully that it would be heard across 3 star systems. Dr. Vasquez began treating wounded guards with the same skill she used on colonists, but she made sure to remove their weapons first, and Marcus Chen advanced on the transport ship where Neela and the other children were being held. You want to know about humans? Marcus called out to Commander Vex as he approached. Here's what you need to understand. We adopt everyone. We see a scared kid, we don't care what planet they're from. They become ours. He raised his weapon toward the transport ship's controls. And we protect what's ours. Commander Vex realized his raid was falling apart. The efficient operation had become a chaotic battle, and his forces were losing. Worse, the humans seemed to be fighting not just for themselves, but for the aliens they worked with. Impossible, he muttered. They're not even the same species. That's your problem right there, Marcus said. You think that matters? The transport ship's engines were still warming up, but Marcus could see Neela's face pressed against the window. The little girl had stopped crying and was watching him with wide, hopeful eyes. Don't worry, sweetheart, Marcus said softly, though he knew she couldn't hear him. Uncle Marcus is coming. Then he aimed his weapon at the ship's boarding ramp controls and fired. The plasma blast from Marcus's weapon hit the transport ship's boarding controls perfectly. Sparks flew from the damaged panel, and the ship's ramp, which had been closing, suddenly stopped and began to lower again. Through the opening, the cries of frightened Kitheran children could be heard clearly. Neela. Zara Keth screamed, seeing her daughter's face appear at the opening, but Commander Vex was not finished. He raised his own weapon toward Marcus, his reptilian features twisted with rage. You primitive fool! You have no idea what forces you're opposing. Before he could fire, James Okafor appeared from behind a mining vehicle and tackled the hegemony commander. The two went down hard, wrestling for control of Vex's weapon. James was smaller and less experienced in combat, but he was fighting with the desperate strength of someone protecting children he had watched grow up. "Sarah," Marcus called out, "can you override the transport's engines?" From inside the engineering building, Sarah's voice came through the colony's communication system. "Working on it. Their systems are more advanced than ours, but I'm finding some backdoor protocols." Dr. Vasquez had organized the recovering Kitharan adults into a rescue effort. Despite their weakened state from the stun weapons, they were moving toward the transport ship to retrieve their children. Their empathic abilities allowed them to sense which children were most frightened and needed help first. "Easy, little ones," Dr. Vasquez called out as she climbed into the transport. "We're here. You're safe now." But the battle was far from over. More hegemony guards were regrouping, and they were starting to coordinate their response. These were professional raiders, not random pirates. Once they got over their initial surprise, they began fighting back with military precision. Energy blasts scorched the ground around Marcus as he provided cover for the rescue operation. He had taken position near the transport ship, using its bulk as a shield while picking off guards who tried to approach. "How many children?" He called out to Dr. Vasquez. 12 Kitharans, 3 human kids from the daycare," she replied. "All alive but scared." Marcus felt a surge of relief. The human children had been taken too. The colony's small daycare center must have been hit during the initial assault. At least now he knew everyone was accounted for. James was still wrestling with Commander Vex, but the alien was stronger and more experienced. The commander threw James off and raised his weapon again. This time he aimed not at Marcus but at the transport ship full of children. "If I cannot have them, no one can," Vex snarled. The shot never came. Zaraketh, moving faster than anyone thought possible, threw herself between the weapon and the ship. The energy blast hit her squarely in the chest and she collapsed with a cry of pain. "Mama!" Neela's voice rose above all other sounds as she saw her mother fall. That cry did something to every human in the plaza. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The sound of a child watching her mother get hurt activated something primal and fierce in the human workers. Sarah Kim's voice came over the speakers, but now it was cold with controlled fury. "All mining equipment autonomous mode. Target hostile forces. Protect the civilians." Suddenly, the plaza filled with the sound of heavy machinery coming to life. Mining vehicles began moving on their own, their powerful tools and crushers now aimed at the hegemony raiders. Excavation equipment moved to create barriers protecting the civilians. Even the small maintenance robots began swarming toward enemy positions. "What kind of colony is this?" one of the guards shouted as a mining robot chased him across the plaza. "The kind where we take care of each other," Marcus replied, systematically taking down raiders with precise shots. James had recovered from his fight with Vex and was now helping Dr. Vasquez evacuate children from the transport. The little ones were scared but responding well to familiar faces. Neela was crying for her mother, but she allowed James to carry her away from the ship. "Is Mama okay?" she asked in her small voice. "Dr. Vasquez is helping her," James said gently. "Your mama is very brave." Zaraketh was indeed badly hurt, but Dr. Vasquez's quick medical attention had stabilized her. The energy blast had caused serious burns, but Kitharan physiology was more resilient than it appeared. She would survive. "My daughter," Zaraketh whispered weakly. "She's safe," Dr. Vasquez assured her. "They're all safe." Commander Vex was growing desperate. His raid was completely falling apart. Half his forces were down. His transport ship was disabled and the humans were fighting with a ferocity he hadn't expected. Worse, his sensors were detecting incoming ships. The human distress signal had been received. "All units fall back to the ships," he ordered. "We're leaving." But Marcus wasn't about to let them escape to raid another colony. He had worked his way around to their landing site and was systematically disabling their remaining ships with precise shots to their engine systems. "Going somewhere?" he asked as Vex and his remaining guards reached their ships only to find them non-functional. Sarah's voice came over the speakers again. "Marcus, I've got 3 Earth Defense Force ships incoming. ETA 4 minutes. Understood," Marcus replied. Then he addressed Commander Vex directly. "You have 4 minutes to surrender. After that, you'll be dealing with people who are a lot less nice than mining workers." Vex looked around at his situation. His forces were scattered or down. His ships were disabled. Autonomous mining equipment was still hunting his remaining guards. And now military reinforcements were coming. "This is impossible," he said. "You're just civilians. Workers. You had no military support, no advanced weapons. Marcus walked closer, still keeping his weapon ready. You made one big mistake, Commander. You thought because we work together we must be weak. You thought because we're not the same species, we wouldn't fight for each other. He gestured toward the plaza, where humans and Kitherans were working together to tend the wounded and comfort the children. You don't understand what you were really attacking. This isn't just a mining colony. It's a community. It's a family. Dr. Vasquez had managed to get Zaraketh on her feet, supported by 2 other Kitheran adults. Despite her injuries, Zaraketh insisted on going to her daughter. When Neela saw her mother approaching, the little girl broke free from James and ran to her. "Mama, I was so scared." "I know, little star," Zaraketh said, holding her daughter tight despite the pain from her wounds. "But we're safe now. The humans saved us." Commander Vex watched this reunion with something like confusion in his reptilian eyes. "They're not even your species," he said to Marcus. "Why would you risk everything for aliens?" Marcus looked at him with genuine puzzlement. "Why wouldn't we?" The sound of approaching ships grew louder. The Earth Defense Force was arriving, and with them would come justice for the hegemony raiders. But Marcus realized that the real battle had already been won. "You know what your real problem is?" Marcus said to Vex as they waited for the authorities to arrive. "You see everything as us and them. We just see us." Around the plaza, humans and Ketherans were working together to clean up the aftermath of the raid. Children were being reunited with parents. Medical care was being provided to injured raiders as well as colonists. The community was already healing itself, and in the center of it all, a 5-year-old Kitheran girl was safe in her mother's arms, while the humans who had risked everything to save her smiled and began planning how to make the colony even safer for everyone. The hegemony had learned a hard lesson about humanity that day, but they wouldn't be the last to underestimate what humans would do for their chosen family. The Earth Defense Force ships landed with military precision, their engines kicking up clouds of dust across the mining colony. Admiral Sarah Thompson stepped out of the lead ship, her experienced eyes quickly taking in the scene. What she saw surprised her. She had expected to find a destroyed colony, dead civilians, and maybe a few survivors hiding in the wreckage. Instead, she found an organized community that had clearly defended itself successfully. Hegemony raiders sat bound and guarded by human workers. Wounded were being treated by both human and alien medical personnel working together. Children were safe in their parents' arms. "Someone want to explain what happened here?" Admiral Thompson asked as she approached Marcus, who seemed to be the unofficial leader of the human response. Marcus gestured around the plaza. "Raiders tried to steal the Kytheran children for the slave markets. We disagreed with that plan." "I can see that," the Admiral said dryly. "According to our intelligence, the hegemony hit this place with a full raiding force. 40 armed troops, military-grade equipment. You're telling me civilian mining workers fought them off?" "Not just us," Marcus said, nodding toward the Kitherans who were helping with cleanup efforts. "This is a community effort." Dr. Vasquez approached with her medical report. "Admiral, we have 15 hegemony prisoners, all requiring medical attention but stable. No civilian fatalities, though several serious injuries. All children accounted for and safe." Admiral Thompson shook her head in amazement. "In 30 years of military service, I've never seen anything like this. How did you coordinate your response so quickly?" Sarah Kim joined the conversation, her engineer's jumpsuit still dirty from crawling through maintenance tunnels. "We didn't really coordinate anything, Admiral. We just acted. When we saw those children being taken, there wasn't time to make plans." "But you fought like a trained unit," the Admiral pointed out. "Tactical movement, communication, coordinated use of resources. That doesn't happen by accident." James Okafor, still holding one of the rescued human children, spoke up. "Maybe we've been training without knowing it. Living together, working together, taking care of each other's kids. When the time came, we already knew how to work as a team." Admiral Thompson walked over to where Zaraketh sat with little Neela. The Kitheran mother's injuries were bandaged, but she refused to let go of her daughter. The child was telling her mother about how Uncle Marcus and the other humans had saved everyone. "Ma'am," the Admiral said gently to Zaraketh, "I understand you were the primary target of this raid. Can you tell me why the hegemony specifically wanted Kitheran children?" Zaraketh's crystalline features flickered with remembered pain. "Our empathic abilities are strongest in childhood. They wanted to train the children as tools For mining, for manufacturing, for entertainment. Young minds are easier to break and rebuild. Admiral Thompson felt sick. She had heard about such things but never seen the aftermath so directly. I'm sorry this happened to your community. We'll make sure the raiders face justice. Justice is important, Zaraketh said softly. But what matters most is that our children are safe. And they are safe because of these humans. She looked around at Marcus, Dr. Vasquez, Sarah, and James. They risked everything for us. They didn't have to. We're not even the same species. Actually, Admiral Thompson said thoughtfully, that might be the most human thing of all. She turned to address the gathered colonists, both human and Catheran. What happened here today is going to be studied in military academies for decades. Not just because you won, but because of how you won. You proved something important about cooperation between species. Commander Vex, sitting bound nearby, spoke up with bitter anger. It proves nothing. This was an anomaly. Humans are supposed to be selfish, violent creatures who only care about their own kind. Every intelligence report says so. Marcus looked at him with something like pity. Maybe your intelligence reports are wrong. Maybe you've been listening to the wrong humans. Dr. Vasquez was finishing her treatment of the hegemony wounded when she overheard the conversation. You know what I think? I think you never met humans who had something worth protecting. When we're just fighting for ourselves, maybe we are selfish. But when we're fighting for our families, she gestured around the plaza. This is what happens. Admiral Thompson was taking notes for her report. The implications of what had happened here would ripple through both human and alien communities. I need to understand the timeline. From initial attack to resolution, how long? About 40 minutes, Sarah Kim replied. Maybe 45. 45 minutes, the Admiral repeated. A professional raiding force defeated by civilian workers in 45 minutes. It felt longer, James said, bouncing the human child he was holding. But yeah, that sounds about right. Little Neela had been listening to the adult conversation with the intense focus that children sometimes showed. Now she tugged on her mother's sleeve and whispered something in the Catheran language. Zaraketh smiled despite her injuries. Neela wants to know if the humans will stay. She's worried that now that the danger is over, they might leave. Marcus knelt down to Nyla's eye level. What do you think, kiddo? Should we stick around? Neela nodded emphatically, then said in careful English, This is home. We stay together. That's right, Marcus said gently. We stay together. Admiral Thompson watched this exchange and felt something profound settle in her mind. She had come here expecting to investigate a military incident. Instead, she was witnessing something that might change how the galaxy thought about interspecies relations. There's going to be a lot of interest in what happened here, she told the colonists. Politicians, scientists, military leaders. Everyone's going to want to study your community. Let them come, Sarah Kim said firmly. But they better understand that this isn't some kind of experiment. This is our home. These are our neighbors, our friends, our family. Dr. Vasquez nodded agreement. They can study us all they want. But they're not breaking up what we've built here. Commander Vex, listening to this declaration, made one last attempt at understanding. But why? What do you gain from protecting aliens? What's the benefit? Marcus stood up and looked around at the community they had all fought to protect. Humans and Kitherans working together to repair damage, comfort children, and tend the wounded. It looked chaotic to an outsider, but he could see the underlying harmony. The benefit? Marcus said finally. Look around, Commander. We get to wake up every morning in a place where a 5-year-old girl can play safely while her mother works. Where different species can build something together, where nobody has to be afraid. He paused, then added quietly, We get to be better than we would be alone. As the Earth Defense Force teams began processing prisoners and taking statements, the life of the colony slowly returned to normal. Children played under watchful eyes. Workers discussed returning to the mining operations. Plans were made for better security measures. But something fundamental had changed. Word of the incident would spread throughout the galaxy, carried by both official reports and personal communications. The story would grow in the telling, but the core truth would remain. On a small mining colony on Zarian 7, when faced with an impossible choice between safety and doing what was right, a group of humans had chosen to fight for children who weren't even their own species, and they had won. It was a very human thing to do. Years later, when Neela was grown and had children of her own, she would tell them about the day the bad aliens came and tried to take her away. But more importantly, she would tell them about how Uncle Marcus and all the other humans had said no, and meant it, and the children would understand that family wasn't about what planet you came from. It was about who would fight for you when the worst happened. That lesson would spread across the galaxy. One story at a time, one friendship at a time, one adopted family at a time. The humans of Zarian 7 had done more than win a battle. They had shown the galaxy what humanity really meant, and that made all the difference.